Harvard's top professor laughed as he tossed the unsolvable math problem into the trash, claiming no one in the building could even begin to understand it. But deep inside the maintenance room, 12-year-old Ellie Cartwright, the quiet daughter of a janitor, stood frozen. She had seen the problem, and something inside her lit up. No one knew her secret. No one saw her coming. But in less than 24 hours, everything would change. The hallway echoed with laughter as Professor Gerald Whitmore crumpled the page and let it fall into the trash. A crowd of elite Harvard students watched with reverence. Whitmore was the most feared and respected mathematics mind on campus. When he declared something impossible, no one dared to question him. "If anyone in this building can solve that," he smirked, "then I will personally resign from Harvard and hand them my job." Students chuckled nervously. No one knew where the problem came from, just that it had stumped the sharpest minds from MIT to Stanford. What none of them realized was that someone outside the lecture hall had been listening. Ellie Cartwright, 12 years old, stood silently beside her father's janitor cart just around the corner. Her father, Thomas, was sweeping the floor near the chemistry lab. Ellie had come along that day because her school was closed for repairs. No one noticed the janitor's daughter. They never did. She wore faded jeans, a hand-me-down hoodie, and worn-out sneakers. But what she lacked in appearance, she made up for in brilliance. Ellie wasn't supposed to be there. She wasn't supposed to hear the professor mock the problem. And she definitely wasn't supposed to feel what she felt when she saw that crumpled piece of paper. As her father stepped into the supply room, Ellie walked over to the trash can and stared down at the wrinkled paper. Her heart raced. Something in the symbols called to her, numbers and patterns that danced in her mind like music. She slowly reached in, took the paper, smoothed it out on the hallway floor, and began to study it. She didn't hear the students walking away. She didn't notice the security camera above her. All she saw was the equation. It felt like a secret game only she could play. For 2 hours, Ellie sat cross-legged in that hallway, scribbling with a pencil she borrowed from her father's cart. Her small hands moved with focus and precision. Her eyes were locked in. Behind her, Professor Whitmore had returned to grab his briefcase. He stopped, frozen in place, when he saw the child solving the problem. The look in his eyes shifted, from arrogance to disbelief. But he said nothing. Not yet. Whitmore stood completely still, watching the young girl trace numbers across the page like an artist painting a masterpiece. For a moment, he thought he was dreaming. The impossible equation he had mocked in front of Harvard's brightest minds was being solved by a child sitting beside a mop bucket on a dirty hallway floor. His first instinct was denial. This couldn't be happening. She had to be copying something. But as he moved closer, he saw the truth. She wasn't copying. She was solving. And not just solving. She was moving through the equation with the eye. Grace that felt otherworldly. Ellie didn't even flinch when his shadow fell over her. She was in a trance, locked into a rhythm only she could hear. Symbols unfolded naturally, one leading into the next like dominoes. Her fingers moved faster. The pencil glided across the paper, guided by something deep inside her. Whitmore felt a strange sensation rise in his chest. Humility. Something he hadn't felt in decades. "Where did you learn to do that?" he asked softly. Ellie looked up, startled. Her eyes widened when she saw him. "Nowhere," she said. "It just makes sense." "How old are you?" 12. He knelt beside her, ignoring the glances from passing students. He reached for the paper and studied her work. His lips parted. She had nailed the first section perfectly. Not just technically, her logic was flawless. Her transitions were elegant. Then he noticed something even more shocking. She had extended the problem beyond its original structure. She wasn't just solving it, she was evolving it. "What's your name?" "Ellie Cartwright. My dad works here." Whitmore turned toward the supply closet. He saw Thomas Cartwright pushing a mop bucket, completely unaware his daughter was unraveling a problem that had stumped every Ivy. League mind. "Do you come here often?" "Sometimes," Ellie said. "I like listening to your classes through the door." Whitmore's heart raced. The story unfolding before him was too wild for any academic journal. A janitor's daughter, untaught, untrained, unseen, had cracked open a mathematical enigma. He had two choices: pretend this never happened, protect his pride, and move on, or do something no professor had done before. Without another word, he took the paper and walked straight to his office. His hands trembled as he opened his laptop and began typing, not to the dean, not to his colleagues, but to the president of Harvard's board. A storm was coming. Harvard had no idea. By the next morning, Harvard's towers still stood proud, but inside, whispers had begun. The board, President Margaret Ellison, known for her unshakable presence and razor-sharp mind, had summoned an emergency meeting. No one knew why. Professors who never missed lectures hurried across campus. Some whispered about scandal. Others assumed someone had resigned. They entered the room and found a single handwritten page displayed on a screen. At the front stood Whitmore, his hands folded, his face unreadable. "This," he said, "was not written by anyone in this room. It was written by a 12-year-old girl. Her name is Ellie Cartwright. Her father is one of our janitors." Silence fell like a curtain. Then a chuckle. "This is a joke, right?" scoffed Professor Raymond. "A janitor's kid?" Whitmore turned to him, steady. "I watched her solve it. She understood it better than any student I've ever taught." Professor Langley leaned in. "You're telling us a child with no formal training did what tenured minds have failed to do for decades?" "Yes," Whitmore replied. "And more than that, she began building on it. She's not memorizing, she's creating." President Ellison narrowed her eyes. "Where is the girl now?" "She doesn't even know what she's done," Whitmore said. "She solved it for fun. For her, it was just curiosity." Ellison stood still for a moment, then gave the order. "Bring her to us. I want to see it for myself." Back in the hallway, Ellie sat on the floor while her father buffed nearby tiles. She was doodling equations when Whitmore returned, this time flanked by 2 board members and a woman in a navy blazer. "I'm President Ellison," the woman said. Thomas looked up nervously. "Is something wrong?" "No," Ellison smiled. "Something is very, very right." Ellie was brought to a large lecture hall filled with professors. She had never seen so many serious faces staring at her. Her hands trembled slightly as she was handed a marker and led to the whiteboard. "Just do what you did yesterday," Whitmore whispered. Ellie looked at the complex equation they'd prepared. Then she began to write. At first her movements were hesitant, but soon the room fell completely silent. They watched her guide them through a solution that defied everything they knew. No one looked away. Even the harshest skeptics sat frozen, their disbelief giving way to awe. When she finished, she turned back and asked quietly, "Is that right?" No one spoke. President Ellison walked to the board, studied the work, and turned to the room. "She is not a visitor," she said. "She is the future." That sentence shifted the ground beneath every person in the room. Ellie had stepped into Harvard's world, not through wealth, not through legacy, but through raw brilliance. And now the institution had a choice: embrace the miracle standing before them, or try to bury it. What no one knew then was that Ellie had only just begun. At Harvard, no professor, no visiting mathematician had accomplished what Ellie just had. Students whispered her name in the library. Faculty debated her behind closed doors. The media caught wind of her feat before the day was done. But within the university's marble walls, not everyone was celebrating. Some whispers turned venomous. Faculty members, long protected by ego and tradition, felt threatened. To them, Harvard was not a place for janitors' daughters. It was a place for legacies, for endowments, for curated excellence. In a lounge lined with portraits of men in powdered wigs and books coated in decades of dust, 3 senior professors sat fuming. Professor Raymond, red-faced and bitter, slammed his hand on the table. "She makes us look like fools," he barked. Professor Langley adjusted his gold-framed glasses. "She is a child, unschooled in decorum or discipline. If we let this continue, what does it say about us?" "It says, she's better," whispered a young lecturer from the corner. The room fell silent. Raymond's glare could crack stone. "Then maybe the institution needs reminding who decides what better means." The next day, the trap was set. Ellie was invited to a seminar. She didn't know they had designed an impossible equation, planted errors, and stacked the audience with critics. When she walked in, second-hand jeans, a faded hoodie, the room was ice cold. Her father, Thomas, waited outside, wringing his hands. He'd seen this shift before. People used to look right through them. Now they stared. Inside, Ellie began solving. Line after line, the chalk danced. Then Professor Langley interrupted. "You missed something," he said, pointing to a minor notation. "That invalidates the entire proof." Ellie paused. Her eyes swept the board. She saw it. Not her mistake, a trap placed from the first line. She smiled. "Actually, you placed the flaw there. The contradiction isn't mine. Want me to? I'll show you why." Gasps rippled through the room. Langley froze. Ellie walked to the side, rewrote the entire equation, added the hidden variable that exposed their setup. She stepped back. Silence. No one clapped. No one spoke. Outside, Thomas saw her and she ran into his arms. "They tried to embarrass me," she whispered. "And you embarrassed them instead." But the battle had just begun. The professors had failed to discredit her publicly, but something darker was starting to take shape. The call came just past midnight. Thomas was fixing a faucet in a grad dorm when his old flip phone buzzed. He almost ignored it. No one called at that hour, but his gut told him to answer. "This is Director Howard Keegan, National Security. Mathematics Initiative. I need to speak to Ellie Cartwright immediately." Thomas hesitated. "Sir, it's late." "It can't wait," Keegan said. "We've been watching her work. We believe she's the key to something far bigger than any of us expected." An hour later, 2 black SUVs pulled up outside their apartment. No lights, no sirens, just quiet purpose. Ellie stepped out in pajamas, still half asleep. Her father stepped in front of her. "She's not in trouble," one agent said. "She's the solution." At a secure federal facility outside Boston, Ellie was treated like visiting royalty. Through biometric scanners and sealed doors, she was led into a chamber with a giant digital screen. "This is Project Shard," Keegan explained. "A formula created decades ago, designed to be unsolvable unless someone's brain works differently. We think you're that someone." Ellie blinked at the screen. Her mind spun. It wasn't numbers she saw. It was rhythm, patterns, language. Music, written for the eyes. For hours she filled whiteboards with ideas and formulas. Agents watched in stunned silence. She never stopped, no breaks, just thought, flowing. By dawn, she cracked the first layer. Keegan stepped forward. "You just solved a formula that stumped cryptologists for 30 years. "It's not a formula," she said. "It's a warning." "A warning?" She pointed to a repeating sequence. "It's not human. Whoever wrote this, they were trying to tell us something, and we've ignored it." Silence fell. Back, in Cambridge, rumors swirled. Students speculated. Professors stewed. She had bypassed their system, their control. To them, that was unforgivable. When Ellie returned to school, even walking across campus felt different. People no longer whispered, they stared, some in awe, others with envy. Then one morning, her ID stopped working. Her name vanished from the university database. No one would explain. Then, under her dorm door, she found a letter. Effective immediately, Ellie Cartwright was expelled from Harvard. No reason, no hearing. Thomas found her sitting on the dorm, steps in the rain, clutching the letter. "They kicked me out," she whispered, "for being different, for being better." Before he could speak, a limousine rolled up. A man in a charcoal suit stepped out, handed Ellie a phone. "The president would like a word with you." 3 hours later, Ellie stood inside the West Wing, shoes still damp, hands cold, heart pounding. Agents lined the hallways. Aides whispered into earpieces. But when she entered the Oval Office, the noise faded. President Monroe rose from behind his desk. "Miss Cartwright," he said, "we owe you an apology. And maybe the future." Ellie could barely process it. The president's gaze held real respect. "What you decoded," he said, "isn't just math. It's communication, a language of prediction. You saw what none of our experts could even recognize." Ellie nodded, slowly. "It felt like someone was warning us about patterns we've been too blind to see." "Exactly. Which is why I'm creating a new federal research division, Project Athena. You'll lead it, full clearance, full funding, independent from any institution." Ellie sat in stunned silence. A week ago, she was being mocked in seminar rooms. Now she would help shape the future of national security. News of her appointment exploded. Social media flooded with hashtags. Ellie decoded it. Math genius. Project Athena. News anchors ran stories about her childhood talent. Former teachers claimed they'd always known. Meanwhile, Harvard faced public fury. Protests, donor withdrawals, alumni backlash. The board scrambled to save face, but it was too late. The world had watched them cast aside the brightest mind of a generation. But Ellie stayed focused. At her new headquarters, she stood before a black screen pulsing with fresh data, each blip a thread in a vast web of signals. One night, while studying a new string of sequences, she spotted it. A second layer beneath the first message. It wasn't just a warning, it was a countdown, and it was nearly at 0. She called Keegan. "We need satellites redirected to the equatorial Atlantic." "Something's forming." He didn't ask questions. Within hours, classified satellite imagery revealed a thermal anomaly rising from the ocean floor. Something old, something intelligent. And Ellie Cartwright, the girl Harvard tried to erase, was now the only one who understood what came next. The world was listening now.